So, good evening, everybody. And once again, we are back with day three of the Civil's Daily Initiative of Daily Answer Wars and Daily Answer Wars Prime. So, again, in the morning, we had given you a question, and you were supposed to post the answers in the Telegram group before 2 p.m. So, many of you have done that, and we are really happy to see your active participation in this initiative. And we will be in this session checking some of those copies that you have submitted, evaluating and trying to analyze where all you have gone wrong or what you have done correctly. And along with it, in the first part of the session, we will also discuss the question that was given, try to understand what all we could have written in the answer and what all different frameworks could have been used for answering the question that was given. So the question was basically from previous year's papers. So it was like GS2 question from the year 2022 itself, and it was related to the domain of international relations, which is an important part in the coverage of GS2 syllabus. So the question was regarding the new initiative of I2U2. So how will I2U2, India, Israel, UAE and USA grouping transform India's position in global politics? So the question was pretty simple one, but you had to have an understanding of the grouping, you needed the knowledge of this grouping and also some of the key facts about the grouping, like what are its aims, what all it has done, and what it envisages to do, and also the understanding of the political geopolitics of the region, and also India's position regarding to that geopolitics. So these aspects were necessary for you to understand before answering this question. So we will see what all we could have written in this answer, and then we will move on to checking out the copies that you have submitted in the group. Good evening, Aryan. Good evening, Meenal. So we start with the again we will go with the same framework, like the introduction, the body, and then the conclusion. So in the introduction, we could have just started with introducing the I2U2. Now this I2U2, as the name itself suggests, basically stands for India, Israel. These two I2 represents India and Israel, whereas the U2 represents UAE and USA. So you could have just started with this by saying that the two I's represent India and Israel, and the two U's represent UAE and USA. And if you were like short on knowledge, otherwise you could just have defined I2U2 like I have done here. I2U2 stands for India, Israel, UAE, and US, and is also referred to as the West Asian Quad. So all of you must be knowing about Quad, that is basically active in the Indo-Pacific region. It consists of India, US, Australia, and Japan. So this is like the West Asian Quad. The two members are common here also, like India and USA, whereas Israel and UAE are the different members of the West Asian Quad, as they are parts of West Asia. Now, this group was first conceptualized in October 2021. So, there was a meeting of the foreign ministers of these countries, and at that meeting, I think this group was first conceptualized, and it was in the month of October 2021. So, you could have mentioned this fact if you knew it. That will add to our aim of adding some fact in the introduction to put some weight to it. Next, I've talked about the aims of the grouping. Like its stated aim is to discuss common areas of mutual interest and to strengthen the economic partnership in trade and investment in the respective regions and beyond. So this was one way in which you could have talked about the I2U2. You could have just mentioned the main aim if you were well read about I2U2. This statement you must have gone through while preparing this topic. So you could have just mentioned it. And even if you were not aware of this or you had not the exact knowledge of the aim, you could just talk about Abraham Accords. Like it was quite famous last year. It was in pretty much in news. So Abraham Accords was basically the signing of a treaty between Israel and UAE, and USA was the mediator of those accords. So you could have just said that this new partnership builds upon the earlier Abraham Accords that was put in place between Israel and UAE. So that could also have been used as an introducing statement. So this was the introduction that we uh, could have given. Next, we move on to uh, talking about India's position in global politics. Like what role can I2U2 play in transforming India's position in global politics? Now we are supposed to become a major power going ahead. So all our foreign policy measures should at least lead us to that goal of becoming a major power. So how this I2U2 grouping will transform India's position needed to be realized. Now there are multiple dimensions to this. So we will see what all we could have written in this, or what all dimensions we could have mentioned. So first and foremost, we could have talked about the political issues, like how geopolitics, India's participation can help in the geopolitical stand of India, or the geopolitical issues that India faces. So three points related to that could have been mentioned, and I think this was easier part of the answer, because geopolitics, most of us understand that India has been relatively in good relation with Middle Eastern countries and also with Israel. So you could have just talked about consolidation and like cooperation. So let us talk about what all India's how India's politics could have been strengthened with this grouping. So the first point is consolidation of India's Middle East policy. Now India will have more freedom to interact with Israel and its Gulf partners because of the new Quad. So this was a pretty obvious thing. Like if you are in a grouping of four countries, two of which are from the Middle East itself, so your interactions will automatically increase. So you could have just talked about this. Next is engagement with Israel. So there is always a simmering tension, because India historically had supported Palestine in its stand against Israel, but in recent times, the relationship between India and Israel has also grown leaps and bounds. There have been visits at the top level in from both the countries. So this grouping officially gives India a platform for engaging with Israel. So here India can deepen engagement with Israel without risking its ties with UAE, because UAE is also a part of the grouping and the other Arab states. Next, we can talk about India being a regional balancer and a neutral arbitrator. So because India, as I said, that India has good relations mostly with like almost with all the Middle Eastern countries. So India can play the role of neutral arbitrator, because uh, we know that like Middle East is the center of conflict between many countries, like between Iran and Saudi Arab, even US and Iran, Israel and Iran. So India can become the neutral arbitrator in the conflicts and confrontations between these countries, and that will surely enhance India's position in global politics. So you can talk about this thing, that India can become a neutral arbitrator. Next, we can also talk about India being a regional balancer. So India can act as a balancer in the region by engaging with all countries in a geopolitically charged region. So on a bilateral level, India can engage with every country and also use this grouping to again like connect different countries. So that will strengthen India's role as a regional balancer. So these are basically related to geopolitical or political points that this grouping will help India to strengthen. So you could have just divided this part, no, this role of I2U2 into three parts. First part, I have talked about the politics of this grouping, like I2U2, how all it can help us politically. Next, we move on to talking about the different areas of cooperation and how that can help us in various fields, for example, in strategic fields or in economic fields. So the next part of my answer relates to that only. So mutual areas of cooperation. Now, when this grouping was established, so all the four countries decided on six mutual areas of cooperation, which were water, energy, transportation, space, health, and food security. So you could have talked about all these six dimensions, that mutual areas of cooperation have been fixed, and this will of course help India to become like develop faster in these dimensions. Next, we can also talk about green growth. So with the help of this was also mentioned in the initial meeting of these countries, and this is like a very initiative linked with the heart of the meeting. So you can talk about green growth with the help of sector capital and expertise. The countries will look to modernize infrastructure, explore low carbon development avenues for industries, and promote the development of critical emerging and green technologies. So what I2U2 will do, it will also give India a platform for voicing the concerns regarding to environment towards these countries, like countries from the Middle East, like Israel and UAE and also US. Now, has always been a supporter of the global south, or you can say the leader of the global south in environmental issues. So, this platform again gives one more opportunity where India can push for cooperation and like arriving at some kind of balance in environmental commitments. So, you can talk about this. Next is about strategic interest. So, all of us know that Israel is a very big exporter of defense equipments to India, like Barak 400, and many other systems are exported by Israel to India. So you can talk about that. So and that will help us strategically. And UAE is also one of India's top oil exporters. So both these countries are part of the I2U2. and both these exports are strategically important for India. So you can talk about that. Next is about economic diversification. So after this, like 3 4 points are which I have tried to like mention, innovate a bit. So you can just no need to mention all of these points. You can just pick 2 or 3 points and talk about that. For example, you can talk about economic diversification. So India has massive IT industries, and it can help the UAE diversify its economy into areas like IT, finance, and agriculture. And this will also improve the standing of India in the eyes of Middle Eastern countries. Next, food security provider. So again, we saw that in the context of Russia-Ukraine war, there was a lot of issues with food security, and India again can pitch in here and solidify its position in West Asia by filling the supply side gap, like food grain to West Asian countries. So we know that India has been like food sufficient for some years now, so we can just export our excessive food grains to these countries and like improve our standing in the world and solidify our positions in the Western Asian in the West Asian domain. Next, we can also talk about technological powerhouse. Again, cooperation can be done in this area also. For example, Israel is famous for its niche technology like nanotechnology, defense, which India can utilize and like cooperate in these areas with Israel. And then India can also like develop and become a technological superpower. So these are some of the points basically related to economy, strategy, and cooperation in various areas, out of which from which you could have selected any 2 3 and could have mentioned, like that would have given a broad sense to the examiner that you know the issues and basically understand that economically and strategically also this I2U2 is a significant initiative for India, and it can help in enhancing the position of India in multiple aspects. Next, the last point that I have mentioned is just about peace and prosperity. So this is an intangible benefit, you can say. The ambition represents the US bet. Like US always hedges upon India that it tries to include India in multiple groupings, so that and hedges upon India that inclusion of India will contribute to the peace and prosperity. So that can also come true. Like since India can become an arbitrator or a regional balancer, so the ambition represents the US bet that India can contribute immensely to peace and prosperity in the region. So these were some of the points that you could have written when we are talking about how I2U2 can transform India's position in global politics. So the main demand of the question was this only, like nothing much is asked in this question after that, like how will I2U2 grouping transform India's position? And I think these points were sufficient enough to show that this is a very important initiative for India, and it can help in multiple aspects, be it politically, be it strategically, be it economically, be it in promoting peace and prosperity. And if India contributes in these domains, of course, India's position will be enhanced in the global politics. So this was the argument that I have tried to make in this answer. Next, we also talk about some of the criticisms of the grouping. You could have mentioned these criticisms, like there are multiple criticisms, but the most prominent one or two you could have mentioned. Otherwise, what you could have done is you could have also gone for a way forward. So way forward again, 2 3 points could have been mentioned, and that was sufficient because none of this is basically asked. So I have decided to go for criticism because mm, this this first part itself is like many of these points are futuristic, like it has not just happened and we are just expecting that this will happen, so it automatically is on the lines of way forward. So rather than that, I have tried to talk about some of the criticisms of the grouping. Like the first criticism of the grouping is that this group was formed to contain Iran. Like all of us know that US and Iran relations are not very good. Basically, uh, after the withdrawal from JCPOA, the relations have gone downwards only. So many critics argue that the USA has a hidden agenda to contain Iran in the geopolitics of West Asia, and therefore it is trying such maneuvers and policies like I2U2. So you can talk about that. And next, you can also mention about India always keeping a distance from issues in West Asia. Like India has been dehyphenating issues, and also it has like been on a very good terms with almost all of the West Asian countries, in spite of large scale confrontations amongst the West Asian countries. For example, India has good relationships with Saudi as well as Iran as well as Iraq. So, like many critics argue that if India starts getting entangled in intra-regional issues, it can affect India itself, and India should try to refrain from being part of such policies or such alliances which force it to get entangled in the intra-regional issues. So you can mention these 2 points. After that, we have just concluded the answer, and conclusion is basically a very futuristic one, and we are just trying to reinforce the aim that was given in the question itself. Uh, Aim of the question was like, how will India, this grouping will transform India's position in global politics. So I've just reinforced that, of course, this grouping will transform India's position in global politics, and how it will do, that already has been explained. So here we have just summarized that. So the I2U2 is a promising initiative with immense potential for cross-regional cooperation, and if it succeeds, it can prove to be a template for future cooperation, along with bringing India in line with other major powers like Europe, China, and Russia. For example, I just talked to you in the beginning of this discussion that India is aiming for becoming a major power, and if this such initiatives succeed, India can be ranked with the likes of Europe, China, and Russia, which are already major powers, and that will, of course, help India in uh, transforming its image, or like gaining more importance with respect to the global politics. So that is it for the conclusion, and you could have just talked about success of I2U2, or generic conclusion, or some quote from some eminent scholar like. There have been multiple articles. For example, C. Raja Mohan writes regularly in the Indian Express. You can just use a quote from his articles, or uh, Sham Saran's articles, any scholars' articles. You could have mentioned that quote, or you could have just gone in for talking about the success of I2U2 and how it will reinforce India's position as a prominent power in global politics. So that was it for this discussion. I think you understood what all were the major demands of the question. I think you just had to explain that how can this grouping help in increasing India's position, or like making India more powerful in global politics, and that you could have done by explaining how it can help India improve in multiple dimensions, and those dimensions could have been like political, geopolitical, geo-economic, strategic dimension, security dimension, all of those things you could have discussed, and that should have been the crux of your answer. Introduction and conclusion were quite easy because I2U2 is a self-explanatory grouping, and in fact, in the question itself, these countries were mentioned, so you had nothing much to do. Just if you remembered the aim of the grouping, or uh, some fact related to it, you could have put it in the introduction and have written a futuristic conclusion, and that would have sufficed for this answer. So now we will move on to looking at some of the copies, and seeing where all you have gone wrong, or what all you could have added in the answers that you have written. Good evening, Arji. Good evening, Varsha. Good evening, Nisha. So first, let us move to Varsha's copy. I2U2, or International Forum for Economic Cooperation, dubbed as Western Quad, focused on expanding economic and political cooperation in Middle East and Asia, following the Ram Accord. It mainly focuses on investments in. Okay, so fine. So you have mentioned the six areas here only. It is okay. You can do that. And I2U2 is also decently explained. So I think that will do. Next, I2U2 will be a game changer in transforming the. Okay, so let us see what you have written. Diplomacy and dialogue. India, which is diplomatic powers, have increased ability to harness more investments from. So okay, strengthens look west policy. India can engage in relationship with Arab countries. Okay, alternative renewable energy hub. India can emerge as an alternative renewable energy hub. Okay, fine. For instance, setting of hybrid. So this is good. Like you have mentioned some examples, ensuring food security. Okay. For instance, UAE to invest. Okay. The greater impetus to Indian agriculture. Fine sector. Agriculture. Okay. Increase government to government, business to business, people to people contacts. Focus on clean energy institute. Terminal expertise to treatment problem. Okay. Strengthening bilateral ties with Israel, age-old defense, and UAE. The signing of conference. Okay. So I think one or two points that you can do better here is, Varsha, that you can just go like topic wise. For example, you can first talk about politics of this grouping. For example, you have mentioned diplomacy and dialogue, look west policy. These are like political aspects of the grouping. And next, after that, somewhere here also you have mentioned it. For example, bilateral ties with Israel and UAE. So this you can mention again in political initiatives, and then you can go for talking about environment, economy. So you can group according to that. So that will present this answer better. And the other thing that you can focus on is like this question is asking how it will transform India's position in global politics. So, for transforming of position, India needs to come across as a giving state. Like India needs to come across as someone who can help in crisis, someone who can improve the position of others. So that will improve India's position overall. If you present India as a help taker rather than a help giver, so that won't uh, suffice to transform India's position in global politics. So more of your points would be related to like how India can contribute to development of other countries or development of that region, development of US, not US, but UAE, Israel, Middle East, how India can develop those regions, that would be better suited for this answer. So you could have mentioned that, for example, in political points, you could have talked about India being regional balancer or neutral arbitrator. You can talk about that. So still in diplomacy and dialogue that is included, but you can just point out that. And here, in some points, you have just talked about how India can benefit. So rather than just Indian benefit, you can talk about how India can help others also. For example, when you talk about ensuring food security, so India has been a food secure nation for multiple years now. We grow more food crops than what we need. So India can become a food grain supplier rather than just taking investments to develop food parks in India itself. So here you can talk about Russia-Ukraine war and how India can fill that gap and become a more prominent player in global area. Next, here also you have talked about Indian agriculture getting an impetus. It is fine. You can give a passing mention of these things that India will also benefit, but also talk about how India can also like improve the condition of countries in Middle East or help those countries. So that will improve India's position. So argue about those points also. For example, you can talk about strategy and all because strategically being a secure nation will also help the overall security of the region. So security is a good point which you can mention. Other than that, you can talk about the other points that I have mentioned, uh, being a representative of the global south in environmental discussions. You can talk about that because most of the global south countries want India to become the leader. And of course, if India takes the initiative, India's position will be enhanced and people will see India in a better light. So you can talk about those things also. So that is the major improvement you can do in this body of this answer. Otherwise, I think points are decent, and you have just talked about I2U2. Like your knowledge is pretty good about I2U2, so you have just gone on to talk about it without giving much attention to what the question is exactly asking. So, if you look at the question deeply, it is asking how it will transform India's position. So, uh, try to show India in a better, more good light. Try to show India as a help giver rather than a help taker. So, that will add the quality of your answers. Challenges associated with I2U2, internal conflicts of the Arab world, sensible splitting of countries, unique. So I think this part is not pretty clear, Varsha. So I think scanning has not been done properly with India's all weather friends and neighbors. Okay. So this is okay. Just like I have mentioned criticism, I think you have gone on for challenges. So just if it is relevant enough, you can mention that there is no issue in that. However, I2U2 will act as a further boost to India's look west policy by engaging with developing okay fine from energy, but also act as a balance by engaging with countries in geopolitical. So this is good. I think conclusion is also decent enough. So overall, I think you understood what I tried to convey regarding the body of your answer. Other than that, most of the answer is pretty good. Your knowledge of the topic is also pretty good, and I think this is one of the better answers that you have written till now. So overall, I think out of 15, you will get 5.5 or 6. 5.5, I think, for this answer. Just improve the body part, and I think you will start getting 6, 6.5 for such answers. Next, let us move to Ritu's copy. I2U2 India Israel UAE in Yusuf on calling the Abraham Accord with Israel. Okay. So again, she has used Abraham Accords as the starting point due to grouping essential for India. Okay. It's good like introduction. You have talked about Abraham Accords, but you can just mention some of the broad aim of the I2U2 also if you wish to. Like I think that is a more relevant introduction because Abraham Accord, if you don't know the aims, it is fine. But if you can, you should try to mention the aim of I2U2. Current position reluctance in engaging with geopolitics of West Asia. India's present relations with countries in West Asia were mostly bilateral in nature. Transformation with I2U2 relations with respect to region, joint focus on West Asia, whether it is looking east as per complementary. No need to mention scholars here, Ritu, because I don't think if you are a PSIR optional paper student, you can mention that in your optional copies. But here, I don't think scholars are needed. If you want, you can just mention a quote at the end of your answer. Current position, reluctance with three countries of West Asia. Transformation in India's position with West Asia with I2U2 is also fine. Israel India's diplomatic help to 42 under the closest. Only India's position with West Asia with I2U2 as a balance of okay. Security cooperation, technological hub. USA India issue, UAE India issue. US role in West Asia diplomatic dilemma. It's fine. Then going for both sides of, especially maintaining its diaspora and define quad. However, the okay. So I think, Ritu, in order to make your answer stand out, what you have done is like you have also mentioned the previous position, like current position. It is good if you can do that, but I think in this answer it is not required because when you are talking about I2U2, there were not multiple issues. When you talk about current position, then you need to specifically write about the deficiencies or like the shortcomings that we have in current times, and then just have to, like, you are bound by some dimensions. Like you must write some issues in the current position, and then you can just talk about how I2U2 can help transform that position. So that just restricts your capability of talking about I2U2 or explaining it in full. So better than that, you can just go for talking about I2U2, and wherever you feel that you have a good point regarding the current position, you can just use it in that point itself. You can just say that, for example, presently we have mostly bilateral relationships, and I2U2 will help in achieving a multilateral or a minilateral relationship in the region. So that can be done, but I think otherwise your answer becomes pretty restricted because uh, bilateral or minilateral is not the issue. If you see about like how position gets transformed, it is about the success of the issue or what I2U2 brings with itself. For example, you can talk about uh, a platform for like arbitration, a platform for balancing in the region. So you need to talk about those things rather than just mentioning the facts of the matter. For example, when you talk about bilateralism or minilateralism, you are just mentioning the facts that it is a minilateral organization, not a bilateral. But what that enables us to do, you are not being able to mention. So I think go for that, and somewhere or the other you can talk it about in your points. But rather than taking this approach, I think in this answer it is better to go for more broader explanation of I2U2. For example, here you have just uh, necessarily you have mentioned that reluctance with three countries of West of Asia, Israel, UAE, and USA. But India's relationship with all of these three countries have been good. So there no need to mention that India has been reluctant or something like that. India can also build upon like positive relationships with the I2U2. Like the objective for Israel and UAE related to this grouping and India related to this grouping might be different. India might have different objectives in its mind, whereas Israel and UAE or even the USA might have different objectives. So you can just focus on how India can utilize its objectives, and if you avoid these things, I think talking about this part only will give you more scope of doing that. So these are fine points. Like you have again gone for talking about food security, economic security, and all of these are good. Like I have explained in the answer itself. Saying is diaspora is also good. Next, let us talk about the challenges. I think some issues. Three countries of I2, okay. Changing geopolitics, okay. Weaponization. So this is fine. However, with I2 and present India's confident foreign policy of minimizing India can secure the major choke points, protects the diaspora, maintain economic prosperity, soft power diplomacy of historic and cultural ties with West Asia. So, in the conclusion, you can make it more broad. I think rather than just again going about talking major choke points, you can talk about maritime security in the body of the answer itself. Here, you can compare India with the major powers or talk about India's goal of becoming a major power, not restricted to just West Asia itself. I2U2 can help realize that broad goal. So, you can talk about that broad goal in this conclusion. So, overall, I think you will get 4.5 out of 15 for this answer too. I think content wise answer is rich, but presentation wise it could have been better. And you don't need to talk about like recent issues and all in order to show that I2U2 is better. It can be done exclusively. Like you can just talk about I2U2 and that will suffice, I think. Next we move to Pooja's copy. A new grouping formed by four nations. This is fine. I2U2 was initially okay. Role of I2 transform India's position in global politics. Ties with West Asia. Fine. Foreign direct investment. Okay. Crude oil and defense is also the success of India's foreign policy. West Asia and its balance. Okay. So again, Pooja, what you can do is like you can go for grouping your answer according to a particular topic. So when you are talking about ties with West Asia, after that you can talk about success of India's foreign policy in West Asia, because these are similar points. So when you are writing about politics, just finish it up first and then go for talking about other things. For example, crude oil and defense. Here also you can frame the subheading better. For example, you can talk about strategic interests rather than just blankly mentioning crude oil and defense, because again you will be mentioning it in the point itself. FDI is also a decent point. Again, you can make it broad like economic cooperation or mutual cooperation. You can write. Next, we move on to India and US have two platforms. Okay, fine. Further strengthen India's role as net security, food security, South Asia and Middle East, as you involved to create number of integrated food parks. Again, you can also talk about how India can help rather than how India can take help. For integrated food parks around India does not help. It is good that India will get developed a bit, like that is not sufficient enough to make raise India's standards in the eyes of the global committee of nations. So you can just talk about how India can also help, like during the crisis, Russia-Ukraine crisis, we saw that India can increase its exports and ensure that food security is maintained in these countries. So clean energy is also fine. Trade and connectivity, I2 can include system trade and commerce of four countries. Okay. Thus, this grouping will also help India strengthen its position in West Asian geopolitics, both strategically and economically. The I2 is a good opportunity to enhance. So fine, this is good. Again, rather than limiting yourself to West Asian geopolitics, I2U2 is of course a West Asian centered organization, but India is not a part of West Asia, neither is US. So you can just go for a more broad overview of the topic in the conclusion. You can see that along with strengthening India's takes in West Asia, or increasing its position in West Asian geopolitics, it can also help in realizing the goal of becoming a major power like Europe, Russia, China. You can give some examples and talk about India's broad goals. And this part, as I have said, you can just arrange it better, like go for the points that you think are similar in nature first. Like, for example, talk about politics, diplomacy, dialogue, and like balancing of power first, and then go for talking about economic points, then go for security. So you just follow an order that will give better presentation to this answer. Intro is fine. You can just mention some of the challenges if you wish to before concluding this answer, and that will, I think, complete this answer. So overall, I think you will get 5 out of 15 for this answer, Pooja. Next, we move to Nikhil's copy. Being formed by four nations, India, okay. Main focus expanding economic, okay. Prime areas of cooperation and significance of I2U2 for India. No, no. I think you can just improve your subheading in this part, because the question is not asking about prime areas of cooperation and in the first place. For example, it is asking how it can transform India's position. So you can just talk about how I2U2 can transform India's position. So that should be a better subheading. After that, you can use points about cooperation and all. That is not an issue. So just don't make it obvious to the examiner that you are just writing what you know. Just make sure that you are framing your points in such a manner, presenting it in such a manner that you understand the question and you are writing according to the question. Even if your points are like you are writing whatever you know, but try to frame your statements or frame your arguments, subheadings in such a manner that the examiner does not get a feel of it. So you can just talk about how it can transform. Next, you can talk about all these issues: security, technology, trade and connectivity, politics, and issue geopolitical presence. All of these are good. Like you have mentioned, decent subheadings here, and explanation of these points will help in like getting some good marks. I2 will boost India's geopolitical presence, especially investigations will help establish India as a world player strategy. So this is good, I think. Next part, Indian diaspora and remittances is also okay. I do the win-win proposition for all the countries concerned. India needs to play a more active role as far as cooperation is concerned by restoring other partners. So okay, conclusion is fine. Again, you can go talking about like India being a major power, and before that you can mention some of the criticisms of the I2U2, and I think that will again be sufficient enough for this answer. So overall, I think you will also get 5 out of 15 for this answer, Nikhil. I think that is enough for today, and again we will meet tomorrow with a new question and discussion session in the evening. Meanwhile, if you have any doubts, you can ask me in the chat box. Titan class starts around 7:30. Join the Telegram group given in the description, and you will get the details of the class in the group. Hello, Khwab. वर्षा जैसे ओके ये क्लास डेली हाँ वही डेली होती है टाइटन कैन यू प्लीज डू मैसेज ऑन टेलीग्राम ओके आई पुट द लिंक ऑफ द टेलीग्राम ग्रुप इन द डिस्क्रिप्शन प्लीज ज्वाइन दैट group and I think you will get all the updates regarding daily answer writing. Thank you, Manoj Anshu. So that is it for today. Again, I'll uh, be meeting tomorrow with a new question and a discussion session in the evening. And again, in the night or in the evening session around 10:11, I'll be posting that night owl discussion where you can participate and improve upon your prelims current affairs issues or like previous year questions. Some of that will be posted and you can just read on and participate in the discussions. Regarding this initiative, you can also join the Daily Warzone Prime. Like multiple students have started joining, and I think we have also started to connect with those students and messaging them and all. And if you can, you should also try to join this initiative to improve your answer writing further, so that we can get into the micro details of where you are going wrong or what all improvements you need for making your answer writing reach a pro level. So thank you very much, guys. Again, we will meet tomorrow. Manoj Johnson, any idea till when the program will continue? It will continue, Manoj Johnson. No issues about that. Like until and unless very near to prelims, we'll try to stop it because most of the focus of the aspirants goes towards prelims. But before that, I think it will continue as long as it can.